The vanishing star, Lionel Messi's final curtain call. There's a moment coming in 2026 that soccer has been quietly dreading for years. A moment when the greatest player most of us have ever watched walks onto a World Cup pitch for the last time. And everyone in the stadium knows it, even if nobody says it out loud. Messi won't arrive in 2026 the way he arrived in Qatar. In 2022, he was a man on a mission, surrounded by a team built to carry him to the finish line. This time, the mission has changed. He's no longer the storm, he's the eye of it, the calm, fading center around which an entirely new generation of players is now circling, waiting. And that's exactly why this tournament matters so much. Because while the cameras will still find him first, the story of 2026 won't belong to him. It'll belong to the names nobody's chanting yet, the ones still warming up in academies, on loan spells, on benches, about to step into a spotlight that's been reserved for legends for 2 decades. This is the changing of the guard, not announced, not ceremonial, just happening quietly in real time, whether anyone's ready for it or not. So before we get to the old guard's final bow, and we will because some goodbyes deserve their own chapter, we need to go looking for the names that are about to replace them. And the first one we found, he's 17 years old, he's already made history, and there's a very real chance he could become the most important player at his own World Cup. The kid from Tijuana, Gilberto Mora's impossible rise. Here's a number that should stop you in your tracks, 17. That's how old Gilberto Mora is. 17 years old, and he's already the youngest player ever to represent Mexico's senior national team. Not the youngest in a decade, not the youngest in his generation, the youngest ever. But age is just where this story starts. While most kids his age are figuring out college applications, Mora was busy rewriting the record books in Liga MX, putting up scoring numbers that veteran analysts had to double check because teenagers simply don't do this. And then, almost as if to prove it wasn't a fluke, he helped his club lift a senior trophy, a real one, against grown men who've been playing professionally since before Mora could drive. Now picture this, Mexico, as co-hosts of World Cup 2026, will be playing in front of the loudest, most desperate home crowds the tournament has ever seen. Decades of hope, pressure, heartbreak, all of it funneled into one tournament on home soil with the world watching. And one of the names being whispered as a key piece of that puzzle is a teenager who just a few years ago was a kid from Tijuana with a ball at his feet and nothing to lose. Can someone that young carry that much weight? History says it's almost impossible. But history also says every so often, impossible is exactly what a World Cup produces. And Mora isn't the only young name being quietly tracked by people who know exactly what they're looking for. In fact, there's an entire continent where the scouting world has been moving in near total silence. And what they found might be even bigger than one prodigy. Africa's hidden architects, the midfield nobody's watching picture a corkboard, pins, photographs, lines connecting one name to another. That's not far from how Europe's top scouting departments have been operating for the last 2 years, except the board isn't covered in superstars. It's covered in midfielders, African midfielders, names that if you follow casual soccer coverage, you've probably never heard. That's not an accident. That's the point. While the cameras chase the obvious stars, a quieter operation has been unfolding, one built around players from Senegal and across West Africa, midfielders with the kind of engine, vision, and composure that clubs in the Premier League in Spain and Germany don't find very often, the kind they fight wars over in transfer windows. These aren't unknowns to the people who matter. Scouts have filed reports. Directors' phones have buzzed. Quiet visits have been made to academies in cities most fans couldn't place on a map. And all of it has been building toward one thing, a World Cup stage, where the rest of the world finally gets to see what the insiders have known for months. Here's the uncomfortable truth about soccer's biggest tournament. It doesn't just showcase talent, it exposes it. Once the world sees what the scouts have been seeing, there's no putting that name back in the shadows. And while one continent prepares to reveal its secrets, on the other side of the world, an entire nation is preparing for something it hasn't experienced in over 2 decades, a return from the wilderness. the Turkish dark horse, a nation returning from exile 24 years. Sit with that number for a second. 24 years since Turkey last stood on a World Cup pitch, back when a golden generation captured the world's imagination with a run that ended in bronze and a wave of national pride that still gets talked about today. And then nothing. Tournament after tournament, the door stayed shut until now. Turkey is coming back, and they're not coming back quietly with a patchwork squad just happy to be there. They're arriving with a young, talented core, and at the center of it, a player so good that his own club has reportedly made it clear he's not for sale, not for any price, not to anyone. Think about what that means. A young attacker already deemed untouchable by one of Europe's biggest clubs, now carrying something far heavier than a starting position. He's carrying 24 years of absence, 24 years of a soccer nation watching everyone else play in the tournament that matters most. There's a particular kind of pressure that comes with being the one, not one of several stars on a stacked roster, the one. The face, the symbol, the proof that the wait was worth it. Whether that pressure becomes fuel or becomes a burden, we won't know until the lights come on. But Turkey isn't the only team walking into 2026 carrying an almost reckless amount of attacking talent. In fact, one Scandinavian nation is bringing a front line so loaded, some are already calling it borderline unfair. Norway's three-headed monster, the forward line that shouldn't be legal. Some teams qualify for the World Cup hoping to survive. Norway is arriving looking like they want to start a fire. It almost feels unfair, the concentration of attacking talent this country has produced. Not one elite striker, not two. A front line stacked with players who on any given night could single-handedly be the best player on the pitch for either team. This is the kind of roster that makes opposing managers lose sleep. Because how do you plan for a team where the danger isn't one player you can mark out of the game? The danger is everywhere. Every transition, every set piece, every loose ball in the final third, it could end with the ball in the net and there's no single name you can point to and say stop him and feel safe. Teams like this carry a label, glass cannon, all firepower fragile elsewhere, the kind of side that could put four past anyone or get caught on the other end of a counterattack and lose 4-3 in a game that felt like a fever dream. And honestly, that's exactly why you won't be able to look away. Norway's matches in 2026 might be the most must-watch fixtures of the entire group stage. Not because they're guaranteed to go far, but because every single one of their games carries the promise of chaos. Pure attacking, no breaks chaos, which in its own way brings us to another young attacker, except this one isn't just chasing goals. He's chasing a destination, and he hasn't been quiet about it. The Bayern prodigy who dared to dream of Madrid, 18 years old. Already a breakout star at one of the most demanding, most scrutinized clubs on the planet. And already, somehow, at the center of a controversy that has nothing to do with how he plays and everything to do with where he might want to go next. Because this teenager did something most players his age are terrified to do. He said it out loud. He named the club of his dreams, and it isn't the one currently paying his wages. In most workplaces, that's a quiet ambition you keep to yourself. In elite soccer, it's a headline, a statement that ripples through boardrooms, through fan forums, through the kind of tense, unspoken conversations that happen in a club's hallways when a prized asset starts looking toward the exit. Now add a World Cup into the mix. For a player like this, 2026 isn't just a tournament, it's a stage. The biggest audition in soccer, watched by every Galactico hunting club on earth, every sporting director with a blank check and a wish list. Play well enough, and the World Cup doesn't just boost a reputation, it can accelerate a move that just months earlier seemed like nothing more than a teenager's dream out loud. Stay and build a legacy at the club that made him, or use this tournament as the spark that sends him somewhere even bigger. Either way, this World Cup might end up being remembered as the moment his career trajectory was decided, for better or worse. And while some players are choosing where their careers go next, others are facing a far more personal choice, which flag to wear in the first place. The diaspora dilemma, players who chose a different flag. Let's go back to that corkboard for a moment. Different pins this time, different lines, birthplaces connected to bloodlines, bloodlines connected to passports, passports connected to national jerseys that in some cases the players' own parents never wore. This is one of soccer's quietest controversies and one of its most human. Every World Cup cycle, there are players born in one country, raised partly in another, with grandparents from a third, and at some point, usually before they're old enough to fully grasp what it means, they have to choose. One flag, one anthem, one nation to represent on the biggest stage in sport, potentially for the rest of their careers. Sometimes it's simple, a clear emotional pull toward heritage, toward family, toward identity, but sometimes it's not simple at all. Sometimes it's about opportunity, about which national team offers a realistic path to actually playing in a World Cup versus which one would leave a talented player watching from home. Is that fair to question? Maybe not, but it's happening quietly every cycle in players you'll be watching in 2026 without even realizing the journey it took for them to be wearing that crest. And those decisions, the ones made in private years before a ball is kicked, are exactly the kind of story that only reveals itself once the tournament begins and the jerseys are already on. Speaking of jerseys nobody expected to see on a World Cup pitch, there's a goalkeeper out there who's been waiting his entire career for exactly this moment. The forgotten goalkeeper, years on the bench, one tournament to prove it. There's a particular kind of patience that doesn't get talked about enough in soccer. It's not the patience of a young player waiting to break through. It's the patience of a goalkeeper, a genuinely top-tier one who has spent years, sometimes the prime years of his career, standing in the shadow of his country's undisputed number one, watching from the bench, training every day at a level that would start for almost any other national team on earth. And waiting. For some keepers, that wait never ends. The starter holds on, retires, and hands the gloves to someone else entirely. But every so often, and 2026 looks like it could be one of those times, the door finally opens. The longtime number one steps aside or simply isn't selected, and suddenly the understudy isn't an understudy anymore. He's the guy. One tournament, one chance to show the world what his own coaching staff has known for years, that he was never the backup because he wasn't good enough. He was the backup because he had the misfortune of being born in the same generation as a legend. Now the stage is his, and in goalkeeping, more than almost any position in soccer, a World Cup can turn a name nobody outside the National Federation could pronounce into one of the most talked about players of the tournament, for better or for absolutely brutal worse. But goalkeepers aren't the only ones stepping out of someone else's shadow in 2026. In South Korea, a quieter changing of the guard is happening too, and it might be even more emotional. South Korea's secret weapon, the bench player who could change everything for years, South Korean soccer has revolved around one name, one legend. A player so dominant, so beloved, that for an entire generation of fans, the national team and this single player have felt almost inseparable. But legends don't play forever, and 2026 may very well be the final World Cup for the man who has carried this nation's soccer identity on his shoulders for so long. So what happens next? That's where things get interesting, because waiting in the wings is a player most casual fans have probably never paid much attention to. Technically gifted, sharp, full of the kind of subtle quality that doesn't always show up in highlight reels, but at his club he spent time playing second fiddle to bigger names, bigger reputations, bigger price tags. At a World Cup though, club pecking order means nothing. What matters is the moment. And if this is truly the end of an era, if South Korea really is watching its biggest star walk into the sunset on the world's biggest stage, then someone has to be ready to catch the torch as it falls. This isn't just about replacing a player. It's about a country quietly preparing to say goodbye to one identity and hello to another. And the man standing at that crossroads might be someone you've never even noticed before. Speaking of players operating under the radar, there's a defender from Croatia whose entire World Cup might come down to a question his own club hasn't answered yet. The $1 million teenager, Croatia's defensive wonder kid under the microscope. Here's a strange contradiction, and it's one worth sitting with for a moment. This is a teenager who has already broken Bundesliga records, already proven at an extremely young age that he can compete and dominate against grown professionals in one of the toughest leagues on the planet. By almost any measure, this is a special talent, and yet, reportedly, his own club now in the Premier League hasn't fully trusted him to start. not consistently, not in the biggest games, a player with record-breaking credentials, watching from the bench in a league he's already proven elsewhere that he can handle. So which version of this player shows up at the World Cup? The one whose numbers suggest he belongs among the best young defenders on the planet, or the one his current club seems hesitant to fully commit to? There's something almost cruel about a World Cup in moments like this. It doesn't care about club politics, about squad rotation, about whatever internal reasoning kept a player out of a starting lineup. It just puts you on the pitch in front of the entire world and lets the result speak for itself. For this teenager, 2026 isn't just a tournament, it's a referendum. Either this is the summer the doubters get silenced for good, or it's the summer those doubts get a much, much bigger audience. And speaking of bigger audiences and final chances, it's time to go back to where we started. Because the kid from Croatia isn't the only one with something to prove. Some of the biggest names in soccer history are about to take their final bow too. The last dance of the old guard, Modric, Ronaldo, and the names that refuse to fade. We started this video talking about endings, about a changing of the guard, about legends stepping back so new names can step forward. But before we close that chapter completely, it deserves a proper send-off. Because 2026 isn't just the tournament where new stars get discovered. For some of the most decorated, most iconic players of this entire generation, it's the last time. The last World Cup. The last time we'll see them pull on that jersey, walk out under those lights, and do the thing they've been doing at the highest level for what feels like forever. Players who have shaped how an entire generation watches soccer, names that for years were the answer to who's the best in the world, names parents will tell their kids about for decades. And now one final tournament, one final chance to add to a legacy that frankly doesn't need adding to, but will mean everything anyway. There's no tension here, no mystery, just the quiet, heavy feeling of watching something extraordinary reach its natural end and trying to appreciate every second of it, because you know with absolute certainty that you won't get this again. This isn't a pity party, it's a tribute. And it's the perfect bridge to the biggest truth of this entire video. Because while these legends are writing their final chapter, history tells us something remarkable about what's about to happen to everyone else on this list. 2026, the tournament that creates legends. Here's something history has proven over and over with almost eerie consistency. World Cups don't just crown champions, they create legends. Think back to 2006. Think about the names that walked into that tournament as promising talents and walked out as global icons, household names, players whose World Cup performances became the foundation of entire careers. Now think about 2022. The same thing happened again. Players who just weeks before the tournament were known mostly to hardcore fans, suddenly impossible to avoid, splashed across every back page, every highlight reel, every conversation about soccer's future. That's not a coincidence. That's what a World Cup does. It takes talent that exists quietly in academies and domestic leagues on benches, in scouting reports nobody outside the industry has read, and it puts that talent under the brightest lights on earth, in front of the largest audience the sport will ever have. And some of those names don't just perform, they transform. They become something bigger than a player. They become a moment people remember forever. So here's the real question, the one this entire video has been building toward. Out of every name we've talked about today, the teenager from Tijuana, the hidden architects of African soccer, the Turkish prodigy carrying a nation's hope, Norway's reckless attacking trio, the Bayern star with Madrid on his mind, the goalkeeper who waited his whole career, South Korea's quiet heir, Croatia's record-breaking defender. Which one of these names is going to be the story of 2026? Because by the time the final whistle blows on this tournament, at least a few of these names some of you have maybe never heard before tonight, are going to be everywhere. Headlines, highlight reels, conversations at work, at the pub, in group chats for years to come. And here's the thing, you'll remember that you heard it here first. If this video gave you even one name to watch for, do us a favor. Hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this one before the tournament kicks off, because we've got a lot more of these stories coming. And down in the comments, tell us, out of everyone we covered today, who's your pick? Who's the name that's going to surprise the world in 2026? We read every single one, so let us know. We'll see you in the next video.